Dear listener, welcome once more to the Hercule Poirot Story Podcast, where the little gray cells awaken to unravel the most perplexing enigmas of the human soul. Tonight, we invite you into the shadowed halls of Blackwood Manor, nestled amidst the fog-laden moors of Devonshire in the year 1928, a time when the vestiges of empire clung to the aristocracy like ivy to ancient stone, and secrets festered in the hearts of the genteel. We beseech you, dear listener, to dim your lights, pour a cup of tisane, and engage your own gray cells. What clues shall you discern before the great Poirot? Share your deductions with us on social media using Poirot Mystery. Even the most astute may be led astray by red herrings. And now, let the curtain rise on Murder Beneath the Candlelight. Chapter 1. The gathering storm. The carriage wheels ground against the gravel with a resonant crunch, echoing through the mist-shrouded avenues of Blackwood Manor, as Hercule Poirot descended from his conveyance. The air hung heavy with the damp essence of the Devonshire moors, where heather bloomed in defiant purple against the encroaching twilight. It was the autumn of 1928, an era when the grandeur of the British Empire still cast its long shadow over the aristocracy, though the foundations of such opulence were beginning to crack under the weight of modern disillusionments. Poirot, that singular Belgian detective of diminutive stature yet prodigious intellect, adjusted his impeccably tailored overcoat against the chill wind that whispered secrets through the ancient oaks lining the drive. His mustaches, waxed to perfection, twitched slightly as he inhaled the scent of impending rain, a prelude, perhaps, to the tempest of human passions that awaited within. Blackwood Manor itself loomed like a sentinel from a bygone age, its Gothic spires piercing the leaden sky, gargoyles perched atop the battlements, as if frozen in eternal vigilance. The stone facade, weathered by centuries of English tempests, bore the patina of faded nobility, its mullioned windows aglow with the soft flicker of candlelight that danced like will-o'-the-wisps against the gathering dusk. Poirot paused at the threshold, his keen eyes, those gimlet orbs that could dissect the human soul with a single glance, surveying the scene. He had been summoned by Lord Reginald Harrington, an old acquaintance whose missive had arrived at Poirot's London flat with an air of urgency veiled in aristocratic restraint. "My dear Poirot," the letter had read, "shadows lengthen here at Blackwood. Whispers of malice unsettle the household. Your gray cells are most earnestly beseeched." As the great oak door swung open with a groan that reverberated through the hall, Poirot was greeted by Mr. Elias Graves, the butler. Graves was a gaunt spectre of a man, his frame stooped as if bearing the cumulative weight of decades in service. His cheeks were hollow, etched with the lines of suppressed grievances, and his eyes, sunken and shadowed, held the inscrutable depth of one who had observed the follies of the upper classes without ever partaking in their privileges. Psychologically, Graves represented an archetype of the repressed underling, a soul fermented in quiet resentment, where petty slights might fester into something more sinister. Was it mere servility that bowed his head, or a cunning dissimulation masking ulterior motives, perhaps embezzlement from the family coffers, or a deeper vendetta born of overlooked indignities? "Bienvenue, Monsieur Poirot," Graves intoned in a voice as dry as parchment, his tone laced with the formal deference expected of his station. "His lordship awaits you in the drawing-room. Allow me to take your coat." Poirot inclined his head graciously, surrendering his garment while noting the butler's slightly arthritic grip, a physical frailty that might serve as a red herring in any unfolding drama, diverting attention from mental acuity. Merci, Monsieur Graves. The journey from London was most fatiguing, but the air of Devonshire, it invigorates the spirit, no? Graves offered a thin smile that did not reach his eyes. Indeed, sir, though the moors can be unforgiving to strangers. With that cryptic utterance, he led Poirot through the cavernous entrance hall, where ancestral portraits gazed down with stern disapproval, their eyes seeming to follow the intruder with judgmental scrutiny. The drawing-room was a sanctuary of faded opulence, its walls paneled in dark oak that absorbed the candlelight, casting elongated shadows that played tricks upon the mind. A grand fireplace crackled with logs of seasoned yew, their flames leaping sporadically, as if in protest against the chill seeping through the casements. The air was redolent with the aroma of beeswax polish and the faint underlying mustiness of antiquity. Seated upon a velvet-upholstered settee was Lady Amelia Harrington, the consort of the host. She was a woman of striking, if waning, beauty, tall and slender, with raven hair threaded by premature silver, framing a face of porcelain delicacy. Her emerald eyes, however, betrayed a psyche fractured by unfulfilled yearnings, a woman trapped in the gilded cage of matrimony, her motives perhaps entwined with the allure of liberation through wealth or illicit passion. She rose with practiced grace, her silk gown rustling like autumn leaves. "Monsieur Poirot, how delightful," she murmured, extending a gloved hand that trembled ever so slightly, a psychological indicator of inner disquiet, or perhaps the onset of some nervous affliction. "Reginald has spoken so highly of your unique talents." Poirot bowed over her hand with continental flair. "Milady, the pleasure is mine. The beauty of Blackwood Manor is rivaled only by its mistress." A flush colored her cheeks, but before she could respond, Lord Reginald Harrington himself entered from an adjoining study, his presence commanding the room like a gust of wind. He was a man of robust constitution, his frame broad and imposing, with a florid complexion that spoke of hearty appetites and the rigors of industry. His whiskers, bushy and untamed, bristled with the authority of one who had forged his fortune in the steel mills of the Midlands, rising from modest origins to lordly status through sheer tenacity. Yet beneath this veneer of bluff geniality lurked a psyche marked by ruthless ambition, motives that might have sown enemies in boardrooms and battlefields alike. "Ah, Poirot, old chap!" Harrington boomed, his voice resonant with the timbre of command. "Jolly good of you to dash down here on such short notice. Beastly weather brewing out there, what? Come, warm yourself by the fire." "Mais oui, milord," Poirot replied, his accent a melodious counterpoint to the lord's hearty brogue. "The storm, it is but an overture to greater disturbances, I suspect. Your letter, it intrigued me, these whispers of malice you mention." Harrington's laughter rang hollow, a forced joviality that masked underlying unease. Nothing concrete, mind you. Just odd goings-on. Letters unsigned, shadows in the corridors. Thought your famous gray cells might sort it out before dinner turned sour. As they conversed, the room began to fill with the other denizens of the manor, each entering like players upon a stage, their psyches a tapestry of concealed motives and simmering tensions. First came Victor Harrington, the son and heir apparent, a dissolute young man of 25, with tousled auburn hair and a pallid countenance etched by the excesses of London society. His attire, though fashionable, hung loosely on a frame wasted by late nights and gaming tables. Psychologically, Victor embodied the archetype of the prodigal, entitlement warped by mounting debts, his motive a desperate grasp for inheritance to avert ruin. He lounged against the mantelpiece, a cigarette dangling indolently from his lips, his eyes, hazel and evasive, darting about the room as if assessing valuables. "Father," Victor drawled, his tone laced with sardonic detachment. "Introducing the family sleuth, are we? Hope he's not here to uncover my latest bill from the club." Harrington's jaw tightened, a fleeting glimpse of paternal exasperation. "Mind your tongue, boy. Poirot's a guest." Next entered Miss Elena Voss, the secretary, a mousy figure of 30 years, with spectacles perched precariously on a sharp nose and mousy brown hair pinned in a severe bun. Her demeanor was one of dutiful efficiency, yet her psyche concealed a volcano of suppressed emotions, passions unrequited, perhaps twisted into vengeful resentment. Motive? A spurned affection, hidden beneath layers of clerical devotion. She carried a sheaf of papers, her hands, small and ink-stained, betraying a slight quiver. "Lord Harrington," she said primly. "The correspondence for tomorrow's post. Later, Elena." Harrington waved dismissively, a gesture that elicited a flicker of hurt in her eyes. A red herring of mere subservience, or a clue to deeper animus? Dr. Marcus Thorne, the family physician, followed, a portly gentleman with a balding pate and wire-rimmed glasses that magnified his watery blue eyes. His hands, soft and manicured, bore a faint tremor, perhaps from age, or the strain of harboring secrets. Psychologically, Thorne was a bastion of professional detachment, yet cracked by the vulnerability of blackmail, his motive, to silence the lord who held leverage over a past medical indiscretion. He nodded affably, settling into an armchair with a sigh. "Evening, all. Storm's a brute. Hope it doesn't flood the roads again." Finally, Colonel James Blackwood, an old comrade from the Boer War and distant relative to the manor's namesake lineage, strode in with military precision. Grizzled and mustachioed, his erect bearing concealed a limp from old wounds, his psyche haunted by battlefield ghosts. Motive, a festering grudge over a perceived betrayal that had cost him fortune and comrades. His eyes, steel-gray and piercing, swept the room like a general assessing troops. "Reginald, old boy," he rumbled, clapping Harrington on the shoulder. "Heard you had a brain box in tow. This the fellow?" Introductions complete, the group settled into desultory conversation, the atmosphere thickening like the fog outside. Poirot, ever the observer, noted the undercurrents. Lady Harrington's furtive glance toward the colonel, a spark of something illicit. Victor's sullen mutterings about debts mounting like the infernal tide. Elena's prim interjections, laced with unspoken barbs. Graves hovered at the periphery, decanting sherry with mechanical precision, his impassive face a mask. As thunder rumbled distantly, heralding the storm's approach, Poirot pondered the intricate web of human motivations. Money, revenge, secrets, each suspect harbored their poison. Little did they know, the evening's true venom was yet to be uncorked. The clock on the mantel chimed 7, signaling the call to dinner. Harrington rose, his voice hearty but strained. "Come, let's dine. The night is young, and mysteries can wait for pudding." Yet, as they proceeded to the dining hall, Poirot's gray cells hummed with anticipation. The gathering storm was not merely meteorological. It brewed in the hearts arrayed before him. Chapter 2. Shadows of Suspicion. The transition from the drawing-room to the grand dining hall of Blackwood Manor was a procession steeped in the rituals of aristocratic decorum. Yet beneath the veneer of civility lurked an undercurrent of disquiet that Hercule Poirot could discern as plainly as the aroma of roasted pheasant wafting from the kitchens. The hall itself was a cavernous expanse, its vaulted ceiling adorned with frescoes depicting mythic hunts, their faded pigments a testament to the manor's venerable lineage. Crystal chandeliers suspended from ornate chains cast prismatic gleams upon the damask tablecloth, where silverware gleamed like polished armaments arrayed for battle. Candles in branched sconces flickered erratically, their flames buffeted by draughts that seeped through the mullioned windows, beyond which the storm gathered force, rain now lashing the panes with insistent fury. Lord Reginald Harrington presided at the head of the table, his robust frame ensconced in a high-backed chair carved with heraldic motifs. To his right sat Poirot, the honored guest, while Lady Amelia occupied the foot. Her posture a study in regal composure that masked the turbulence of her psyche. Victor slouched to her left, his indolent demeanor a deliberate affront to propriety. Miss Helena Voss perched primly beside him, her spectacles reflecting the candlelight like tiny shields. Dr. Marcus Thorne settled opposite, his portly form sinking into the cushions with a sigh of contentment, and Colonel James Blackwood took the remaining seat, his military bearing undiminished by the informal setting. Mr. Graves orchestrated the servants with the precision of a conductor, his gaunt figure gliding silently as footmen presented the first course, a delicate consommé infused with herbs from the manor's own gardens. As the soup spoons clinked against fine china, Poirot initiated the conversation with his characteristic finesse, his voice a melodious intrusion into the heavy silence. "Milord, this consommé, it is exquisite, a symphony for the palate. One wonders what secrets the chef employs to achieve such clarity." Harrington chuckled, a booming sound that reverberated off the paneled walls, though Poirot noted the strain in his eyes, a psychological fissure betraying apprehension. "Our Mrs. Hargrove has been with the family for donkey's years. Family recipes, Poirot, guarded like state secrets. But enough of victuals. Tell us of your latest triumph. That affair in London, the poisoned chalice at the opera, was it?" Poirot demurred modestly, twirling his moustache. "Ah, milord, the grey cells, they merely assemble the puzzle. But here, at Blackwood, I sense pieces yet scattered. These whispers you mentioned, perhaps they emanate from within these very walls." A hush fell, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder. Lady Amelia's spoon paused mid-air, her emerald eyes flickering with a momentary alarm that she swiftly veiled behind a sip of wine. Her psyche, Poirot mused, was a labyrinth of suppressed desires. Married young to a man whose ambitions overshadowed her own aspirations, she harbored motives tangled in the promise of autonomy, perhaps through inheritance, or a clandestine liaison that offered escape from conjugal tedium. "Monsieur Poirot," she interjected smoothly, "Reginald exaggerates. Manor life is ever prone to idle gossip. The servants, you know, imaginative lot." Victor snorted, his pallid face twisting into a sneer as he speared a morsel with undue vigor. "Gossip? Father's successes provide ample fodder. Stepping on necks to climb the ladder, eh? Not all of us applaud the industrial grind." His words dripped with sarcasm, a red herring of youthful rebellion that concealed the desperation of a gambler ensnared by debts. Psychologically, Victor was a vortex of entitlement and envy, his motive crystallized in the anticipation of a patrimony that could redeem his profligacy. Yet Poirot observed the way his eyes darted toward the decanter, a subtle aversion that hinted at deeper complicity, or perhaps mere paranoia. Miss Voss adjusted her spectacles, her mousy features sharpening with disapproval. Master Victor, such impropriety at table ill befits your station." Her voice was clipped, a veneer of dutiful rectitude overlaying a psyche seething with unacknowledged passions. Employed as secretary for nigh on a decade, she had witnessed the Harringtons' intimacies and indiscretions, her motives perhaps rooted in a spurned affection for the lord himself, a rejection that festered into vengeful intent. Poirot noted her furtive scribbling earlier in the drawing-room. Not mere notes, but perhaps a cipher for darker designs. A timeline inconsistency nagged at him. She claimed to have been in her chambers at tea-time, yet a housemaid had glimpsed her in the study, arguing in hushed tones with Harrington. Dr. Thorne, mopping his brow with a linen napkin despite the room's chill, steered the discourse toward safer waters. "The weather turns foul indeed. I prescribe a bracing brandy after dinner to ward off any incipient chills. Reginald, your cellars boast the finest cognac this side of the Channel." His suggestion, delivered with avuncular warmth, planted a seed of misdirection in Poirot's mind. Thorne's psyche was a fortress of clinical detachment, yet cracked by the vulnerability of a past transgression. Rumors of a botched procedure in his youth, leveraged by Harrington as blackmail. Motive: to silence the wielder of that damning knowledge, preserving his reputation and the lucrative practice it sustained. The faint tremor in his hands, Poirot surmised, was not merely age, but the manifestation of gnawing anxiety. Colonel Blackwood, his grizzled mustache bristling, regaled the table with anecdotes from the Boer War, his voice a resonant baritone that commanded attention. "Reginald and I, back in 001, pinned down by sniper fire. He dragged me to cover, saved my hide. But wars leave scars deeper than flesh, eh? Fortunes won and lost on the veldt. His tale, laced with camaraderie, concealed an undercurrent of bitterness. Psychologically, the colonel was haunted by a perceived betrayal. Harrington's post-war prosperity built, he believed, on spoils denied to him through some battlefield slight. Motive: revenge, simmered over decades, now boiling to the surface. Poirot observed a clenched fist beneath the table, a physical clue to restrained fury. As the main course arrived, pheasant roasted to golden perfection, accompanied by root vegetables glazed in honey, the conversation fragmented into pockets of tension. Lady Amelia engaged the colonel in murmured asides, their heads inclining too closely for mere politeness. A stray thread of emerald silk from her gown caught on his cuff, unnoticed by others, but catalogued by Poirot as potential evidence, or a cleverly planted red herring. Victor muttered sullenly about London clubs and their infernal ledgers, his gaze evasive when pressed on his recent absences. Helena interjected with pedantic corrections to the colonel's chronology, her primness a mask for simmering resentment. Graves, overseeing the service, lingered unduly with the wine decanter, his hollow eyes scanning the assemblage like a vulture assessing carrion. His psyche, fermented in years of obsequiousness, harbored motives of peculation, small thefts from the household accounts, perhaps escalating to something graver if discovered. A footprint in the Persian rug of the hall, muddied from the garden despite the rain, caught Poirot's eye earlier. It matched the butler's polished boots, suggesting clandestine excursions. The meal progressed through dessert, a decadent trifle layered with custard and sherry-soaked sponge, amidst desultory exchanges that grew increasingly strained. Thunder clapped overhead, rattling the chandeliers and eliciting a gasp from Elena. Harrington, his florid face flushed with wine, raised a toast to enduring friendships and the banishment of shadows. The clink of glasses echoed hollowly. Post-dinner, the company adjourned to the library, a sanctum of leather-bound tomes and globe lamps that cast a warm, deceptive glow. The storm raged without, wind howling like a banshee through the chimneys. Harrington, settling into his favorite wingback by the hearth, gestured for brandy. Graves decanted the amber liquid with ritualistic care, distributing snifters to each. Poirot accepted his, inhaling the bouquet, rich with a hint of oak, while observing the rituals. Thorne's eager sip, Victor's hesitant swirl, Elena's prim abstention. As the clock struck 9, Harrington lifted his glass anew. To resolutions, old and new. He sipped deeply, then paused, a frown creasing his brow. A cough escaped him, harsh, ragged, his hand clutching at his throat. This brandy tastes queer. The glass slipped from his grasp, shattering on the hearthstone as color drained from his face. The room froze in tableau, psyches teetering on the brink of revelation. Was this the onset of malaise, or the insidious creep of something far more lethal? Poirot's gray cells ignited, the shadows of suspicion deepening into the abyss of impending doom. Chapter 3. The Fatal Flicker. The chime of the grandfather clock in the hall reverberated through Blackwood Manor like a somber knell, marking the stroke of 10 as the company migrated from the library back to the drawing-room. The storm outside had escalated into a veritable maelstrom, the wind howling with feral intensity against the casements, while sheets of rain battered the panes as if seeking ingress to the sanctum within. The electric lights, unreliable in such tempests, had flickered and failed earlier in the evening, leaving the room illuminated solely by a profusion of candles, ensconced in silver holders upon the mantel and side tables. Their flames danced erratically, casting elongated shadows that writhed across the Persian carpets and up the oak-paneled walls, transforming familiar faces into grotesque masks of light and dark. Hercule Poirot, ever the epitome of composure, seated himself in a wing-back chair near the hearth, his keen eyes surveying the assemblage with the precision of a cartographer mapping uncharted territories of the human soul. Lord Reginald Harrington, his florid complexion now tinged with a pallor that bespoke either indigestion or deeper malaise, sank heavily into his accustomed seat, the brandy snifter still clutched in his broad hand. The amber liquid swirled languidly as he raised it to his lips once more, savoring what he presumed to be the solace of fine spirits. Yet Poirot, attuned to the subtleties of human behavior, noted the slight hesitation in his gesture, a momentary falter that hinted at an instinctive foreboding. Harrington's psyche, forged in the crucibles of industrial ambition, was one of unyielding resolve. Yet cracks had begun to appear. The weight of anonymous threats, the erosion of familial bonds, all converging in this isolated enclave. Lightning rent the sky beyond the windows, a jagged bolt that illuminated the room in stark, ghastly relief, etching the features of each occupant in momentary clarity. Lady Amelia Harrington, perched upon the settee with feigned nonchalance, her silk gown pooling like liquid emerald around her, averted her gaze from her husband, her emerald eyes shadowed by lashes that veiled a tumult of emotions. Psychologically, she was a portrait of restrained elegance, fractured by yearning. Motives intertwined with the promise of freedom from a union that had long since lost its luster, perhaps accelerated by a surreptitious attachment to another. The Colonel's earlier proximity at dinner had not escaped Poirot's notice, a red herring of mere camaraderie or a thread in a larger tapestry of betrayal. Victor Harrington lounged indolently against the arm of a chaise, his youthful features twisted into a mask of bored indifference that ill concealed the avarice simmering beneath. His psyche was a cauldron of entitlement and desperation. Debts accrued from gaming dens and ill-advised ventures pressing upon him like a vice. The inheritance loomed as salvation, yet his eyes, darting furtively toward his father's glass, betrayed a complexity. Was it anticipation or guilt that quickened his pulse? Miss Elena Voss, ensconced in a straight-backed chair near the escritoire, fidgeted with her spectacles, her mousy demeanor a facade for a psyche ablaze with suppressed passions. A love letter, glimpsed earlier by Poirot in the disarray of her chamber during a discreet perusal, justified in his mind by the exigency of the summons, spoke of unrequited devotion to Harrington himself, spurned with casual cruelty, transforming affection into a venomous grudge. Her hands, clasped tightly in her lap, trembled faintly, a psychological clue to inner turmoil or perhaps the residue of a deed already done. Dr. Marcus Thorne, positioned by the window as if drawn to the storm's fury, sipped his brandy with measured calm, his portly frame belying the tremor in his fingers. His psyche, armored in medical detachment, harbored fissures from a blackmail note Poirot had discovered tucked in the Lord's desk, a damning record of a youthful malpractice that Harrington wielded like a cudgel. Motive, the extinction of that leverage, restoring equilibrium to a life precariously balanced. Colonel James Blackwood paced the room with the rhythmic cadence of a sentinel, his grizzled countenance illuminated sporadically by the candle flames. His military precision masked a psyche scarred by old vendettas. The Boer War betrayal, real or perceived, festered like an unhealed wound, motives rooted in restitution for lost honors and fortunes. Mr. Graves hovered at the periphery, his gaunt form a shadow among shadows, murmuring offers of replenishment. "Another brandy, my lord," he inquired of Harrington, his voice a sepulchral whisper. Poirot recalled the butler's earlier lingering with the decanter, a timeline inconsistency, for who else had access during the brief interlude between dinner and library? Conversation sputtered fitfully, the storm's cacophony drowning attempts at levity. Harrington, seeking to dispel the pall, raised his glass anew. "To the morrow, when this blasted weather clears and we can all breathe easier." He took a generous draught, then paused, his brow furrowing. A cough erupted from him, harsh, convulsive, his free hand clutching at his throat as if to dislodge an invisible obstruction. This brandy, bitter, he gasped, his voice strangled, eyes widening in dawning horror. Poison, cyanide. The room erupted into chaos as Harrington's body convulsed, the snifter tumbling from his grasp to shatter upon the hearthstone, shards scattering like accusations. He collapsed in a heap, limbs twitching in final protest, before stillness descended, his florid face now a mask of ashen finality. Lady Amelia's scream pierced the air, a theatrical wail that rent the night, her hands flying to her face in a gesture of histrionic despair. Poirot, observing from his vantage, deemed it overly rehearsed, a psychological clue to feigned grief masking relief or culpability. She swooned dramatically toward the colonel, who caught her with alacrity, his arms encircling her in a manner too intimate for mere solicitude. Victor knelt beside his father, his pallid face contorted in simulated anguish. Father. Good God, no! Yet Poirot discerned the gleam in his eyes, a flicker of avarice that betrayed the psyche's true north, liberation from paternal oversight, the floodgates of inheritance opening wide. Miss Voss fluttered ineffectually, her spectacles askew. We must summon aid, the telephone, the doctor. Yet she delayed, her trembling hands hovering without purpose, a red herring of shock or the paralysis of guilt. Her earlier access to the herbal remedies in her chamber, some redolent of bitter almonds, loomed in Poirot's mind. Dr. Thorne rushed forward, his portly frame belying surprising agility, kneeling to examine the fallen lord. He pressed fingers to the neck, sniffed the residue in the shattered glass. Cyanide, the unmistakable scent of bitter almonds. He's gone, I'm afraid. Pulse absent, respiration ceased. His pronouncement, delivered with clinical calm, masked any complicity. Yet his earlier suggestion of brandy now resonated with sinister undertones. Colonel Blackwood barked orders with martial authority. "Lock the doors. Seal the windows. No one leaves until we sort this infernal mess." His precision hid the vendetta's shadow, his eyes scanning the room as if appraising enemies on a battlefield. Graves, impassive as a statue, murmured, "I poured the brandy myself, sir, from the sealed decanter." A timeline flaw. Poirot recalled the butler's brief absence post-dinner, during which any could have tampered. Unruffled, amidst the pandemonium, Poirot rose, his diminutive form commanding attention through sheer force of intellect. "Calm, mes amis. Panic serves only the guilty. We must preserve the scene." He approached the body, his gaze cataloguing physical evidence, the glass shards, residue gleaming ominously, footprints leading to the French doors, smudged by intruding rain, suggesting an external ingress or a feint, a torn scrap of fabric beneath the chair, emerald silk matching Lady Amelia's gown, yet too conveniently placed. Motives crystallized in Poirot's gray cells, Victor's financial desperation, Elena's vengeful scorn from the spurned love letter, Thorne's blackmail liberation, the Colonel's ancient grudge, Amelia's quest for autonomy, perhaps abetted by romance, even Graves' peculations, escalated by discovery. The storm raged unabated, floods isolating the manor like a besieged fortress, suspicions festering like untreated wounds. Lightning flashed anew, illuminating faces now etched with accusation and dread. Poirot, methodically examining the decanter, detected the faint almond trace, confirmation of foul play. A blackmail note in the desk, a love letter in Elena's room, muddied footprints tracing to the garden where cyanide-bearing plants grew wild, all threads in a web of deception. As the clock ticked inexorably toward midnight, the drawing-room became a pressure cooker of psyches laid bare, Amelia's theatrical sobs subsiding into calculated glances, Victor's feigned mourning dissolving into impatient pacing, Elena's fluttering evolving into defensive postures, Thorne's calm fracturing into nervous perspiration, the Colonel's commands revealing authoritarian cracks, Graves' impassivity cracking with subtle shifts. Poirot, assembling the mosaic, pondered the inconsistencies. Elena seen near the decanter at 9:45, contradicting her alibi. Thorne's unnecessary brandy advocacy. The silk scrap, perhaps planted to misdirect. Red herrings abounded, but order and method would prevail. The fatal flicker of candle, of life, had extinguished one soul, igniting the inferno of suspicion that would consume the night. Chapter 4. Threads of Deception. The pallid light of dawn filtered through the heavy draperies of Blackwood Manor, casting a spectral glow upon the moors that stretched beyond like a desolate sea of heather and mist. The storm had abated in the small hours, leaving behind a sodden earth and a sky bruised with lingering clouds, as if the heavens themselves mourned the abrupt departure of Lord Reginald Harrington from the mortal coil. Within the manor's confines, however, the atmosphere remained charged with an oppressive tension, the air thick with the acrid residue of suspicion, and the faint, lingering scent of bitter almonds that clung to the drawing-room like a malevolent spectre. Hercule Poirot having retired briefly to a guest chamber for a few hours of repose, during which his gray cells churned ceaselessly, emerged impeccably attired, his mustaches waxed to razor precision, ready to unravel the threads of deception that ensnared the household. The local constabulary, summoned via a messenger dispatched through the receding floods, arrived mid-morning. Inspector Jarrow, a burly man of middle years, with a ruddy face and a mustache that rivaled Poirot's in girth if not in elegance, accompanied by 2 uniformed sergeants. Jarrow, whose psyche betrayed a pragmatic efficiency tempered by a deference to Poirot's renown, deferred to the Belgian detective with gruff courtesy. "Monsieur Poirot, we've heard of your exploits. Poisoning in a locked manor sounds like one of those penny dreadfuls. We'll secure the premises. You handle the cerebral bit." Poirot inclined his head. "Merci, Inspector. The body remains undisturbed? Bon. We commence with the interrogations in the study, a room of solitude where truths may emerge from the shadows." The study was a bastion of masculine erudition, its walls lined with leather-bound volumes that exhaled the aroma of aged paper and tobacco. A massive oak desk dominated the space, cluttered with ledgers and correspondence that hinted at Harrington's industrial empire. Poirot seated himself behind it, transforming the chair into a throne of inquiry, while Jarrow loomed nearby, notebook in hand. The suspects were summoned one by one, each interview a surgical dissection of psyches, motives, and alibis, interwoven with physical clues that Poirot catalogued with meticulous care. First came Lady Amelia Harrington, her elegant frame swathed in mourning black, a veil partially obscuring her emerald eyes that now brimmed with artful tears. She perched on the edge of a chair, her gloved hands clasped in a pose of fragile vulnerability. Psychologically, Amelia was an enigma of cultivated poise, masking volcanic undercurrents, a woman whose matrimonial bonds had chafed like ill-fitting shackles, her motives perhaps rooted in the allure of widowhood's independence and a clandestine passion that promised renewal. "Monsieur Poirot," she murmured, her voice a silken whisper laced with tremor, "this horror. Reginald, gone so cruelly. Who could harbor such venom?" Poirot's eyes, gimlet-sharp, fixed upon her. "Milady, the venom was literal, cyanide, swift and merciless. You were nearest when he collapsed. Did you observe any anomaly with the brandy?" He noted the faint hesitation, a psychological tell. Her gaze flickered toward the window, as if seeking escape. "Nothing, I assure you. We were all partaking a convivial ritual." Yet Poirot recalled the emerald silk scrap beneath the chair, a match to her gown, yet her attire last evening showed no tear. A planted red herring, perhaps, to divert suspicion. Delving deeper, Poirot inquired of her movements. "At 9:45, post-dinner, where were you?" She claimed the powder room, but a housemaid's whisper suggested a rendezvous in the conservatory with the colonel, a timeline inconsistency that frayed her alibi. Letters discovered in her boudoir, scented with jasmine and penned in a masculine hand, confirmed the affair. Love, it can be a motive as potent as hatred. Poirot mused aloud, eliciting a flush of indignation. "I loved Reginald once," she protested, "but time erodes even the stoutest affections." Her departure left a trail of perfume and doubt. Victor Harrington followed, slouching into the room with the insolence of youth, his pallid features etched with feigned bereavement. He lit a cigarette with trembling fingers, exhaling smoke that curled like serpents in the still air. His psyche was a maelstrom of entitlement warped by dissipation. Debts mounting like tidal waves, his motive the expeditious claim to the Harrington fortune. Father's dead, poisoned, bloody awful, but if you're implying I had a hand— His defiance cracked, eyes evasive. Poirot leaned forward. "Monsieur Victor, your absences from London, gaming debts, no? A telegram in your father's desk demands repayment of £5,000. Inheritance would be most convenient." Victor blanched, a psychological fracture evident in his stuttered denial. "I was in the billiard room during the brandy pouring. Ask Graves." Yet mud on his shoes, tracked from the garden where cyanide-bearing laurel bushes grew, contradicted his claim of indoor seclusion. A forged note in his pocket, implicating him in threats against his father, emerged during a discreet search. A misdirection, perhaps planted by another to cast him as the villain. Miss Elena Voss entered next, her mousy demeanor amplified by red-rimmed eyes behind spectacles, her hands clutching a handkerchief, like a talisman. Psychologically, she was a volcano cloaked in primness, years of dutiful service masking a passion ignited and extinguished by Harrington's casual dalliance. The love letter in her chamber, crumpled and tear-stained, bespoke rejection turned to rancor, motive. Revenge for humiliated affections. "He was my employer, nothing more," she insisted, her voice quavering. "Yet, mademoiselle, cyanide traces in your herbal remedies, tisanes for the household. And your presence near the decanter at 9:45, witnessed by a footman, contradicts your assertion of retiring early." Her fluttery denials unraveled, behavior patterns revealed, furtive notes at dinner, perhaps recipes for death rather than correspondence. A red herring emerged. The remedies were communal, accessible to all, but her psyche's turmoil pointed inward. Dr. Marcus Thorne, portly and perspiring, settled heavily into the chair, his wire-rimmed glasses fogging slightly. His psyche was a citadel of professional veneer cracked by vulnerability. The blackmail note in Harrington's desk chronicled a fatal error in his medical past, leveraged for favors. Motive: silencing the extortionist to safeguard his livelihood. Preposterous accusations, he blustered, his tremor pronounced. "I suggested the brandy for health, nothing sinister," Poirot countered. "Doctor, the will names you beneficiary if foul play is suspected, a curious clause, and your access to poisons, as a physician." Thorne's alibi held. Treating a servant's ailment but a vial missing from his bag hinted at opportunity. Psychological clues. His calm during the collapse, a mask for premeditation. Colonel James Blackwood strode in with military crispness, his grizzled mustache bristling, eyes steel gray and unyielding. His psyche bore the scars of war. Betrayal in the Boer veldt where Harrington's actions, perceived as self-serving, cost him comrades and fortune. Motive: vendetta, long simmered. Old grudges, aye, but murder. I'm a soldier, not an assassin. His bootprint matched the garden track, leading to the laurel, physical evidence damning, yet he claimed a nocturnal stroll for fresh air, despite the storm. Colonel, the silk thread on your cuff, emerald from Lady Harrington's gown. An affair, perhaps abetting her motives. Blackwood's flush confirmed the liaison, a red herring intertwining their fates. Finally, Mr. Graves, the butler, entered with stooped deference, his hollow cheeks accentuating a sepulchral air. Psychologically, he was the archetype of repressed servility. Decades of deference breeding resentment, motives in petty thefts uncovered, stolen heirlooms in his quarters discovered during the search. "Loyalty, sir, that's my creed," he intoned. "Yet, Mr. Graves, you poured the brandy. And your absence at 9:30, where?" He claimed the pantry, but inconsistencies loomed, peculations exposed by Harrington, threatening dismissal. As evening descended anew, candles relit in the drawing room. Poirot gathered the threads. Physical evidence, the silk, footprints, cyanide traces, psychological patterns, evasions, tremors, flushes, timeline flaws, 9:45 sightings, absences, hidden motives, money, revenge, secrets. A forged note implicating Victor, planted in his room, pointed to Elena's handwriting. Red herrings proliferated. The silk to frame Amelia, the vial to suspect Thorn. Poirot paced the study alone, gray cells synthesizing. The web tightened, deceptions unraveling like frayed yarn. "The truth," he murmured, "it approaches inexorably, like the tide reclaiming the shore." Outside, the moors whispered secrets, but within, the manor held its breath, awaiting the denouement. Chapter 5. The Revelation of the Gray Cells. As the veil of twilight descended once more upon Blackwood Manor, the flickering candlelight in the drawing-room cast elongated shadows that danced like phantoms across the ornate furnishings, mirroring the restless psyches of those assembled within. The storm of the previous night had yielded to a sullen drizzle. The moors outside shrouded in a mist that seemed to seep into the very soul of the edifice, amplifying the atmosphere of impending reckoning. Hercule Poirot, that paragon of deductive prowess, stood at the center of the room, his diminutive stature belying the colossal intellect that commanded the attention of all. His mustaches, impeccably waxed, twitched with the subtle satisfaction of one who has pieced together the intricate mosaic of human deceit. Arrayed before him in a semicircle of high-backed chairs were the suspects. Lady Amelia Harrington, her emerald eyes veiled by a lace handkerchief. Victor, slouched with feigned nonchalance. Miss Helena Voss, prim and pallid. Dr. Marcus Thorne, perspiring despite the chill. Colonel James Blackwood, erect as a sentinel. And Mr. Graves, hovering at the periphery like a spectral attendant. Inspector Jarrow and his sergeants flanked the doors, their presence a silent bulwark against flight or folly. The air hung heavy with the residue of unspoken accusations, the faint scent of extinguished candles, mingling with the acrid tang of fear. Poirot, with a theatrical flourish, adjusted his patent leather shoes upon the Persian rug, stained now by the muddied footprints of the previous eve, and cleared his throat, his voice emerging as a silken thread that wove through the tension. "Mes amis," he began, his accent a melodious counterpoint to the somber British tones that had dominated the interrogations. "We gather here not merely to mourn the untimely demise of Lord Reginald Harrington, but to illuminate the shadows of deception that have cloaked this manor in tragedy. The murder, ah, yes, murder it was, executed with the precision of a maestro conducting a symphony of malice, was no impulsive act, but a calculated orchestration where motives intertwined like the roots of ancient oaks upon these moors. The method, cyanide, that insidious poison, administered in the brandy during our post-dinner repose. But who, among this august company, wielded the fatal dose? The gray cells of Hercule Poirot, they have pondered, dissected, and reassembled the puzzle. And now, the revelation. A collective intake of breath rippled through the room, psyches teetering on the precipice of exposure. Lady Amelia's gloved hand tightened upon her handkerchief, her psyche a tempest of cultivated restraint masking the undercurrents of liberation she anticipated from widowhood. Victor's eyes, hazel and evasive, darted toward the decanter upon the sideboard, a relic of the fatal night, his entitlement warped by desperation now manifesting in a subtle tremor. Helena Voss adjusted her spectacles with fingers that betrayed a faint quiver, her mousy exterior concealing a volcano of suppressed passions. Thorne mopped his brow, his professional detachment fracturing under the weight of scrutiny. The colonel clenched his fist, old grudges simmering like embers. Graves remained impassive. Yet Poirot discerned the hollow eyes flickering with repressed servility's bitterness. "Let us commence with the physical evidence," Poirot continued, pacing with measured steps that echoed softly upon the floorboards. "The emerald silk scrap, torn and discovered beneath the victim's chair. A match to Lady Harrington's gown, no? Yet, milady, your attire upon examination showed no such rent. A planted clue, a red herring to ensnare the unwary. The footprints leading to the French doors, smudged by the intruding rain. Colonel Blackwood's boots, indeed, but from an earlier perambulation in the garden, not the moment of the crime. The cyanide residue in the glass, the decanter, traces that point to opportunity, but not intent." He paused, his gaze sweeping the assemblage like a searchlight. "Now, the psychological clues, the behaviors that betray the soul's secrets. Lady Harrington's grief, theatrical yet laced with an undercurrent of relief, as one freed from matrimonial bonds. Her furtive glances toward the colonel, corroborated by letters scented with jasmine. Ah, the affair. It provides motive, but not method. Victor's sullen mutterings of debts, his eyes gleaming with avarice upon his father's collapse, a psyche distorted by profligacy, yet his alibi in the billiard-room holds, mud on his shoes notwithstanding. Victor's sneer faltered, a crack in his facade. "You're barking up the wrong tree, Poirot. I wouldn't—" Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "Potions, monsieur. Dr. Thorne's calm pronouncement of death, his suggestion of the brandy, a mask for complicity. The blackmail note in the desk, chronicling your past indiscretion, provides ample motive to silence the lord. Yet your tremor, it is of anxiety, not guilt. The missing vial from your bag, perhaps mislaid in haste." Thorne exhaled sharply, his portly frame sagging. "I swear, I had no hand in it. The colonel's military bark, ordering the lockdown, hiding a vendetta from the Boer War, where perceived betrayal cost you dear. Your clenched fist, a psychological pattern of restrained fury, the garden track, your domain. Yet, mon colonel, revenge simmers, but does it boil to murder?" Blackwood's mustache bristled. "I've faced worse accusations on the veldt. Mr. Graves," Poirot turned to the butler, "your sepulchral whisper, your lingering with the decanter, peculations uncovered, heirlooms in your quarters. Motive, fear of dismissal, resentment fermented over decades, yet your servility, it is genuine, non? A red herring of circumstance." Graves bowed his head, hollow cheeks flushing faintly. "Loyal to the end, sir." Poirot halted his pacing, positioning himself before the hearth where the fatal collapse had occurred. Now, the timeline inconsistencies, the threads that unravel the web. The decanter poured at 9:30 by Graves, yet tampered with thereafter. At 9:45 a footman glimpsed a figure lingering, not Victor, absent in billiards, not Amelia in the conservatory with the colonel, not Thorne attending a servant, not Blackwood pacing the hall, not Graves in the pantry. "Ah, but Miss Voss, you claimed repose in your chamber, yet the witness places you there, mademoiselle." Elena's spectacles slipped slightly, her prim features paling to ashen. "A mistake, surely. I was indisposed." Poirot's eyes gleamed. Indisposed, or disposing of poison. The hidden motives, money for some, revenge for others, secrets for all. But yours, mademoiselle, is the cauldron of humiliated passion, the love letter in your chamber crumpled and tear-stained. "My dearest Elena, your affections flatter, but I cannot reciprocate." Spurned by the lord after a fleeting seduction. A psyche transformed from dutiful adoration to vengeful scorn. The room tensed, eyes turning toward Elena as she clutched her skirts, her quiver escalating to a tremor. Lies. He was kind. Kind. Until he laughed at your proposal of marriage, Non. The cyanide from your herbal remedies, tisanes prepared for the household, redolent of bitter almonds, accessible, disguised as benevolence. Your furtive notes at dinner, not correspondence, but a recipe for death, calculations of dosage. The forged note implicating Victor in your precise hand, a misdirection to scatter suspicion. Elena rose abruptly, her mousy bun unraveling slightly. He promised, whispers in the study, stolen moments, then mockery. A secretary's fancy, he called it. I couldn't bear. Poirot nodded, his voice softening with a trace of pity. The red herrings, the silk planted to frame Lady Harrington, the vial missing to suspect Thorn, the footprints enhanced to point to the colonel. But order and method prevail over chaos. The behavior patterns, your delayed call for aid, a feint of concern masking triumph. The inconsistencies in your alibi, frayed by witnesses. The psychological clues, your suppressed volcano erupting in precise malice. Inspector Jarrow stepped forward, his ruddy face set in determination. Miss Voss, you're under arrest for the murder of Lord Reginald Harrington. Elena collapsed back into her chair, sobs racking her frame. A catharsis of the psyche's pent-up storm. He deserved it. The humiliation. As the sergeants led her away, the manor seemed to exhale, the oppressive weight lifting like mist burned by dawn. Lady Amelia dabbed her eyes, relief mingling with sorrow. Victor straightened, avarice tempered by shock. Thorn sighed, his tremor easing. Blackwood saluted Poirot with grudging respect. Graves bowed, loyalty vindicated. Poirot, turning to the window where the drizzle abated, murmured, Justice. It is the candle that pierces the darkest veil. The human soul, mes amis, is a labyrinth, but the gray cells, they illuminate the path. Outside, the moors awakened under a tentative sun, the manor's shadows retreating. The enigma resolved, yet the echoes of deception lingered, a reminder of the fragility of trust.